Welcome to Beyond Revenue, Narratives of Revenue Leaders. Today I had an amazing discussion and conversation with Jimena Mondragón. She's a digital strategist, entrepreneurial growth leader with a career spanning from startups, her own company, to scale-ups and enterprises. She has led marketing, communication, and partnership at WorkMotion. She is the former vice president of strategic partners in general of WorkMotion. And we had an amazing discussion about growth patterns, the growth go-to-market truth, what to focus on, how to turn a company from a hyperscale, which is struggling, to a fully very well set operating company. I love the conversation, and I'm really looking forward to what you say when you deep dive on go-to-market insights from startup to global enterprise. Welcome to Beyond Revenue, Narratives of Revenue Leaders. Today we want to talk about GTM insights from startup to global enterprise. Jimena, I'm very happy to have you today in the show. I'm really looking forward to our discussion. When I'm well informed, right? You have a very diverse CV, yeah, from I saw on, I think most probably it was a student job, from research support on a university or on a school, to consulting, to founding your own company, to doing account management, leading account management on an enterprise, to becoming a marketing lead on the other side, and now and then leading even strategy and partnerships. I think you have so many different views on how to do business and growth. So I'm really looking forward to our discussion. But putting it better in your own words than I can, so maybe you can present quickly yourself. Who are you, and what all the things that you have done? Yeah.
Great. Thank you, Michael, for that great intro. And very excited to be speaking with you. I guess if anyone looks at my profile, is the opposite as a linear trajectory. I've done a little bit of everything, but as my career has progressed, is something that I really treasure. Being able to be versatile, to learn by doing, by being thrown into the cold water. I do believe that's like one of the best ways to really get to actually understand how things work. And I can tell you, like, I've worked at large companies, working with really like global brands. Also started my own startup, and lastly, like, I was leading marketing, communications, and then partnerships at WorkMotion. And now I'm now taking a different step in my career as well. So it's going to be interesting what's next. I'm very excited to be talking about all of this knowledge that I've acquired in like different positions and also different stages and sizes of companies.
Cool. Now I'm really looking forward. I think it's absolutely impressive on having such a diverse CV or progress in your career, right? So different topics, somehow similar, or in a similar field, but somehow very, very different. And I think showing this on such a high leadership level shows the flexibility you have, and shows how fast you can adapt. So really looking forward to our discussion. I think it's gonna be quite interesting. Let's get started with one. Maybe you remember, maybe not. What was your very first GTM challenge? Yeah, where you were faced with, and maybe what did you learn, and what was so surprising around it?
Well, I think I do remember very clearly my first challenge was start with no resources, like zero resources. And it was from our own startup. One of the founders was their second enterprise, second attempt to do a successful startup. So he was very focused on, we need to prove market fit, but not just by gathering a couple of clients. We need to prove traction and get revenue, even kind of before thinking of investment, or like, oh, we need investors. Like, it was more important to actually get things going. And this was an analytics tool back then when the first app store launched. So this is how old I am. The challenge was like, you don't have resources, you have a new product, it's a completely new ecosystem. Like most app owners were just starting to understand, how do I monetize my mobile apps? How
Mm.
does this app store works? And back then it was a transition, if you remember, especially in gaming, was like Facebook, social games, Farmville, and this type of era, then went into proper like monetizing via mobile apps. And it was like, okay, where do I find customers? How do I get them with almost no resources? Well, I mean, no paid budget, and so that was a. And also, we didn't have any restriction in terms of like, okay, we are going to focus on the U.S. market only. This was a U.S. startup, or we're going to focus on only this category of
Mm.
apps. It was like, okay, you go and fetch, basically, just bring us clients, bring us money, like the purest like go to market challenge. It's like prove that this works. What I learned from it was so much. I think especially when you don't have resources, I always find it like quite refreshing because it forces you to be very creative. So basically what we did is just pure content. And where were these app developers? Everyone was starting to use Facebook ads.
Mm.
So we didn't have that much money to run a lot of ads. We ran a couple, but most of it was just trying to get content out there and build community. And I think from that moment on, I did understand like one, knowing exactly what the pain point is of your customer and know how to speak to them, it's always going to be important. Because that actually, we started working with, I still remember my first clients were so diverse. An app that's still on the App Store available. So
Mm.
it's like very successful, but from Finland, an educational app from Mexico. We had like a couple of different categories of apps from the US, all different in financial services and music and gaming and
Nice.
lifestyle. But yeah, I mean, within 3 months, like we started getting like actual money in the door just by really being hands on in like, okay, I know what our product can solve. How do I translate it? And where are my clients, right? So it's a very, very scrappy, but that was the first big challenge I had.
Pretty cool. And I think it's a very good learning because it's better you understand your clients, or in this case, you didn't, but it's better you understand what you can solve and how you can cater to their pain points, as much better you can actually address them and really generate interest because, right, it's all about sparking the interest by showing them that you can actually help them, right? And not just throwing money at them.
Absolutely. And it's a good old show, just don't tell, right? Like it's the telling is not enough. You need to
Yeah, yeah.
actually prove it. And so, yeah, I think that was really, really interesting. Plus it also, I think, ingrained in a very early stage in my, yeah, professional like learning, how important it is to actually get things going and prove that your product works.
Mm.
So it was never like, think and test and you have enough time. It was the opposite. It was like, okay, if this works, then people will pay for it. Just,
Fair enough. Yeah,
yeah.
interesting. But when now thinking about the early stage, let's put it on the different way or a different look on your GTM on the big enterprise you work with. What is the fundamentally different in these two worlds? Are there big differences are they or
Yeah. I mean, I think in terms of the core, like where do I make impact and how can
mm,
I actually like really create traction, is the same, let's say, like Northern Line. Like you're chasing the same goal.
mm,
But I would say that at startups and like at early stage, you have a lot of room to improvise. So
mm,
improvisation is actually healthy, I would say, and it's a very dynamic environment. Whereas where you are working with larger companies, global brands, I think the challenge isn't really just the creative part, but is executing at scale.
mm,
And for me, like a really, I think it was my best skill when I work with really big clients was getting everyone aligned. And that
mm.
actually, I would say, do not minimize that because it's really a great skill to gain consensus and have alignment. That is something that is crucial when you're working at a larger scale, right? And so it can be that certain aspects of what will drive growth
Mhm.
right, are the same, right? But definitely certain things, there's not that much space for improvisation or doing scrappy things. And you need to spend way more time thinking about alignment.
Sure.
That everyone kind of like just pulls all the strength into the same direction.
Yeah, yeah, and I think it even requires that you quite focus on what you want to achieve and how to communicate around it, right? In order to get them on the
Yeah.
on board, instead of most probably in the early stage, you're more in the trial and error part where you can say, look, let's spend some monies and then or some euros, and then let's see where we gain traction.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think, I mean, I also know a lot of people working at very like big enterprise companies, and funny enough, I'm not going to mention which company, but one very, 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 very big, one of the big tech companies. Maybe when I say what happened, everyone will know which one. But they were like, you know what, we don't have that much problem in terms of the whole organization and everything, because it's like run a little bit like a monarchy. And I'm like, what? Yeah, like what the founder says, everyone does, everything's aligned, and then we're so efficient. And compare that to other enterprise where there's so much time spent in documentation, in
Mm,
processes, in meetings. I was like, it doesn't sound that bad, because yeah, really scaling and making sure like a lot of different or complex products or complex organizations move at the speed and towards the goal you want does require a lot of effort, right? So it's like,
mm,
maybe that's not such a bad idea
mm.
when there's such a clear direction, right? Rarely happens. I think there's also like the larger the company, you diversify the portfolio, the capabilities, and so on. So, yeah, I would say those are two different type of challenges,
Yeah,
right?
and I think usually if you grow the company, yeah, you're able to hire senior talent, which are hopefully in the specific area better than you, and that's why you hire them, right? So most probably dominating them by dictatorship is not the easiest, what makes everyone happy. But in terms of
Yeah.
efficiency, most probably it might work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was surprised because the people that work at this company were like, well, at the beginning, it took me like a good 1 or 2 years to really get used to this because there was
Mhm.
not that much room to discuss. And as you say, like when you bring like really high qualified people with a lot of expertise, everyone will have a different point of view, right?
Mm.
And so that also, I guess, brings a lot of other like maybe blind points that before you couldn't even notice.
Mm.
But and on the other hand, they're very efficient, right? They know what they need to deliver. So it's like, I hope we can find something in the middle.
Fair enough. So what would you say, what's your price to you as well in right when structuring go to market or planning scaling go to market, right? You said staying consistent, talking or aligning, being focused, regardless of the size. What are the right in the end we follow this or it follows the same patterns, but what are the elements which are really important in order to grow consistently and scale?
Yeah, I mean, I think part of it is always really understanding kind of what you're solving and who
Mm,
your customers are, right? I think these are like two key elements that maybe you kind of need to always have a refresher even because if you're always I mean what I've noticed is that maybe at startups you have a lot of room to improvise and
mm,
you're very creative and you try a lot of different things and then you're kind of like building inside because you build the organization but then you lose track of what your actual customers are saying, right? And I think go to market and general like go to market teams need as much as like for example product teams to be constantly hearing from customers and prospects, right? So these are things that I feel like are constant and not everyone does them that often, right? You build of course thinking of an ICP, but then you also need to know the reality of how things are used, what are the pain points that you're really solving,
mm,
and what are your like yeah like your battle cards to win, right? So if you have that, I think you can really craft a go to market that is very structured and can actually also be very, very fast because you will know in what to focus. And so if you know your product well and you know your customers, connect them, know how to talk to them, right? And the messaging is so important. And I would say those elements are crucial. There's a reason why we talk about them and over talk about them.
Mm.
If you don't have them in place, it's not really going to work. So once you have this, then you start understanding what is predictable, what is constant, right? And then you can also think of, okay, how can I ensure that this grows even more, right?
Yeah, fair. And does it have impact, right? Or even if you have no resources available in your very early stages, or if you have a resource, I mean, this more or less stays the same. But I think the challenge is, especially if the company grows, that you keep in contact and listening and actually take the learnings and put it back to in the organization. How do you approach this, right? Because I think in the early stage when you're a small team, there's no way around because, right, you always talk with them. And if something to share, there's not many people to listen, more or less, right? If you 10, 15, 30, 40 people. But how do you do it in a bigger in a bigger environment?
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe at a startup, I would say like the speed is basically speed and survival are the most important things, right?
Mm,
And so what moves the needle every week is important. And you feel like, okay, because we're such a small team, everyone's aligned.
mm,
Uh, but I think like one big problem there is trying to look like enterprises too soon also might hurt a startup. And by that, I mean like creating a lot of processes or playbooks, right? And I'm not saying don't build them, but be aware that they're not going to be like the final playbook, right?
yeah,
And what happens usually is you really need to understand what are you building in terms to ensure that there's scalability in your process, right? So it's not just about hiring more people, but what as a company you're building internally, even from culture standpoint, communication standpoint, alignment with, I mean, contributors, hiring and onboarding strategies, like all the people that you bring in. I feel like that's where you need to invest in those areas to really ensure that as you scale, you are preparing for, like increasing demand, right? And then, like, if you already scale very fast and you never thought of this, then things are going to be very tough for a while until you can actually make sure everyone's on the same page and you've built
mm,
internally all the resources. Same, like, I mean, it's even from the small things, like where do people find things, how do you communicate things, what ideas are you refreshing constantly as an organization and as a go-to-market team, is your marketing and sales team speaking the same language, like this type of things. I don't think it's never too early to start, but you need to be aware that you are going to be reworking
mm.
as you grow, right? And I feel like that's where you feel like, okay, then I need like 30 hours in a 24-hour day, because when do I do that? But I think it's equally important to always carve time to build the internal resources and knowledge. And I always call it like scaffolding, right? Like if you're building a I don't know, a tower or something,
Mm.
what is inside the structure, right? And how are people going to go up and down? How are you going to make sure everyone's speaking the same language? How are they going to be able to use the same tools, right? Like all of these things are like as important as delivering results. So I would say that that could be like a great way to think about it. Do not sacrifice like what moves the needle, but also carve some time to start building within.
Yeah, fair. And I think even right what you said just in now, it's right. Like, look, some are too scared to build any structures and processes, and some do way too many and make the
Mhm.
organization slow. And I think in the end, and I think that's a good sentence, right? You build something which is not final, but I would say it's good that you build something which is not final. Just be aware that you build a basis where you can operate, which creates alignment, transparency somehow, and enables you. But on the other side, live your live your structure and develop it further, because when are they done? I guess not really any time, right? So they always need to grow, develop, and adapt. And I think sometimes, especially when they grow to a certain stage of revenue, quite often they turn the extreme flexibility of this early stage small company to a process monster, right? Where they make it
Too complicated.
everything over complicated, then numbers are not getting delivered, and then most of the time management gets it changed, and then they clean it up, and then they find the middle way. That's at least my experience on it. So I think both things to cater is it's very good.
Absolutely. I think sometimes people assume that what work for like 1, 10, 50 customers will work for like 100, 1,000 customers. And then reality, like a lot of these processes like either break, the org design also, right? It needs to change. And sometimes even the messaging of what you're selling needs to evolve, right?
Yeah.
And so I think it's a very interesting, interesting way of comparing, right? Like, okay, what I want to drive is growth and I want to bring in the revenue. When is it too early to start with what? And what would actually be obsolete when I try to scale, right? And I think they're like, you need to be brutally honest. Like sometimes you just took the wrong decision, right? And you overhired. It's like, I don't need that many people. Or, yeah, the tools that we have today are not built for scale. Like, then you really need to invest in that as early as you can spot this is not going to hold for 1,000 customers, right? So
And
yeah, I think
it will hurt. It will hurt as it will hurt more and more as more you postpone the,
absolutely.
the
So
decisions there. Yeah.
yeah, and I think maybe it's maybe what I've seen also with teams is that like the moment you start getting a lot of traction, you feel things are great. And at that moment, I feel it's when you should start questioning. Instead of
Yeah.
just feeling like, oh my God, we made it, we're growing so much, let's party. Like, I think that's the moment that you should be like, okay, now things are getting serious. Do I have what it takes, right, to hold
Absolutely.
on all of these demands? Yeah.
And you will feel it quite in the time when the numbers are not growing as exponential anymore. Then you know, and then you there you understand. Have you built a robust go-to-market team where you can act or not? Yeah, and I think maybe let's dive in a little bit on your extreme scaling experience from your last employer, right? I think very early in the day, starting at this company when they just started. How old were they? A year or?
I think when I joined, they were actually running for like 3 months or so.
Okay, even right.
Like,
So
I think, yeah, I mean, I can tell you when I joined WorkMotion, my first task was to create WorkMotion because it actually had a different name before
okay,
WorkMotion. So they were like, okay, the name is done. Just build us like a brand and like just start getting clients. Like, that's what we need. um, and yeah, I mean, it was very interesting because, well, first we kind of like, okay, created a bit of consensus of like who we are, right? Like, I think sometimes even on, I mean, I don't know, it depends on the team, but sometimes people think branding as something very superficial, right? And like so far, and it's the colors and the logo, and then you're done. But I think for me it was a way of really getting to know the founding team, their personalities, what is this company really doing, and like why are you deciding to create like a company that is addressing this problem, and trying to create like like a culture within even a small team, right? And yeah, I mean, it was just, the traction was amazing, unbelievable. The company really, really grew super fast in terms of ARR, in terms of hiring people, which is a really great time also, right? It felt like, oh my God, we're killing it.
mm,
Every single week, closing so many new logos. But I think one big learning was, I guess, the seeds of like really big problems that, I mean, the company struggled with growing pains for a while. They were already started from like the early stage, right? So in terms of, for example, how many people you bring in? Oh, more clients, more money. We can hire more. That's not always the answer, right? Like
fair.
bringing in more people is not gonna really solve so many of the problems. And also, I would say that can lead to an excitement that makes you lose focus, right? And I saw it as well. It was like, okay, then let's just try to do 5 more things. And every single quarter, there was like a new area that we needed to put the attention. So even the management, we were like, okay, hot topic in January was so different than March, and nothing really was really ironed out.
Mm.
And same, like there were no processes, no tools, right? So then, of course, when you actually are start to serve more clients, things start getting wonky. Like it's not gonna really, you're not gonna sail that smoothly
Fair
anymore.
enough.
Um,
Alignment and I guess transparency around is around within the team is quite challenging. How did they or how did you all overcome this so it actually got into a mature company, right? How did you get the
well,
alignment between the teams, the product, the client?
I think like this sort of like crisis mode where you start having problems, right, was super healthy because
Mm.
it made like everyone face like, okay, what are we doing? How do we clean the house? How do we run this smoothly? And it was a push to actually build a more mature organization, right? And I think even in the way of working, what WorkMotion managed to do unbelievably good was really maturing the resources and the team, not
Mm.
necessarily by bringing more people or more senior people. It was not always the matter of bringing in expertise from outside, but also building the resources that we had, and like also we had really good qualified people that knew the insides and outs of everything of the company, so promoting those that actually were holders of knowledge, right, worked a lot, and focusing on like delivery. We need to fix things, right? And I think making sure that everyone was on the same page and be open about it managed to really overcome those growing pains, and the company change attitudes, right, like from like a very scrappy and very volatile startup to a way more mature organization that is not reactive, right, like that it has plan, that is very proactive, that knows what everyone's doing. And even the tone of, I would say, like our founders like changed so much, right? So it was a very interesting ride. I would say when things don't go well, it's a great opportunity to learn. So
Sure.
if you really commit, try to do it, go through it. Don't feel like, okay, this is not going to work, this is a fail. If it's not really like that late
Yeah,
and
yeah.
you can still turn the ship into a different direction, it's an unbelievably good opportunity to reassess everything. What are we doing? How are we building? How are we hiring? Who's doing what part? And even, I mean, in the case of WorkMotion, was it scaled because there was a lot of demand, and that, of course, great news. Complicated to build to really deliver great service to so many clients so quickly, but then also the market change, right? So there's some moments that whatever you're selling is not so hot, and finding your sweet spot. I think those were the two really unbelievable, like difficult challenges that, yeah, I would say WorkMotion and the whole, not just leadership team, but every single contributor that had a lot of knowledge was able to pull through, right? And
Mm.
yeah, I mean, the company is now 6 years, right? Like in business and still growing. So yeah, I'm becoming very healthy, right? So really, it's also a great. It's stressful, of course. I'm not going to sugarcoat that, but it can be a great moment if you take the right decisions
Fair.
to mature the organization.
I think it's was probably a learning a steep learning curve even for every individual involved, right? You need to be, what did you say, brutally honest, right? I guess, and I think because if you sugarcoat things there, you're not going to fix them. So most probably, maybe you can share a little bit here. What, how did you manage to keep the right? Because when shit hits the fan, it's quite some. What do I see quite often is like I call it uncontrolled actionism, yeah, in over,
Mhm.
double, triple reporting, making everybody work quite manual, which then leads to no focus on the business really, but just on the transparency, which we haven't built before. I don't know, how did you cover or how did you manage this?
So I think, I mean, from the go-to-market team and like revenue organization, something that was very useful was to try to leave what's very small, like the small details, as small
Mm,
details, right? And this, for example, what you mentioned, right? Like people spending so much time doing reporting or analyzing data or pulling things to just understand why are things wrong, right? One very good decision that we took as a team was to really create one single source of truth. It was not, I'm not going to say like it was perfect, but it was one absolute dashboard with all the company KPIs. And so at some point, you need to sign it off. Everyone
mm,
had like, yeah, but there's the attribution of that is that lead from marketing, but it was taken by an SDR. There was always that. But at some point, I think as leadership, you need to say, like, okay, that noise is going to exist, but everyone, let's just sign it off. This is our source of truth. Let's not spend more time in discussing where the problem is or who's dropping the ball. We need to all get to the same finish line,
mm,
right? So that was also very, very healthy, right? Like not over consuming the time in like finding the problems. And I always was pretty much like in go to market, I see it from demand generation, from marketing, sales, that there are all these tensions, right? Who's bringing what? And when you're not getting enough clients, the usual thing is like, oh, marketing is not delivering leads. Marketing is like, our job is not bringing leads. We're
the
generating
blaming game.
demand. Yeah, exactly. And so it was like, okay, well, it doesn't matter, right? Like we are all in the same boat. Like we just need to deliver. So we, for example, starting testing like different strategies for I mean, something particular about WorkMotion that maybe something that we also discuss is that WorkMotion didn't just start in addressing like the DACH market only, but we actually, at the moment I started, we launched across more than 7 countries in Europe,
Mm,
right? So it was interesting to say like, okay, what other areas of opportunity, what we have underdeveloped. So use cases, markets that didn't have attention. How do you localize a lot of things? And those type of tweaks really help us find again traction in the growth, right? And yeah, and be realistic, right? Like, I mean, WorkMotion helps companies hire abroad and advocates for remote work. And all of a sudden, there's like huge PR campaigns and all a lot of different like big companies calling back to office, not hiring remotely. So it
mm,
was okay, this is happening, but let's look at the numbers. Let's find this. Like this is going to be a problem that will continue to happen. You don't find the talent, right? And so let's just not get all kind of like with really sunny glasses before change them into everything's bad. And so the mentality part I think is very important, right? One, don't spend all the time discussing really the small details, have an alignment across the organization and the leadership of what is the absolute source of truth as leadership,
mm,
track KPIs, and second, do not let kind of like overwhelmed by like the bad news. There will happen, right? Like those type of things will happen, and I think it's really building that resilience even in the individual contributors, right? So those were some of the key aspects that I really think made a difference in turning the mood also,
mm.
because I also see it that it starts with a problem and it rolls like a snowball, right? And then people are like, oh, everything's bad, everything's going
Yeah,
bad.
yeah.
Then the org needs to change. So there's layoffs, and then even more people get even more, yeah, into a zone that is actually not going to let them work, right?
Mm,
And in a productive way. And so I would say like that really do depend on how you can bring as a leader and showcase yourself even as a resilient mentality, right? Like to go against the challenges, to face errors, to fix problems. Yeah, and I think that that openness helped a lot in the case of WorkMotion, and I saw it also across other areas of the company, like maybe more on the operational side as well. And yeah, I think at some point it just realized like, okay, you don't have to just fight inside, right? And like, we're all here trying to do the same thing. We're all on the same side. That really made a big change in how to overcome those moments that are like very stressful and
Mm.
quite difficult.
Yeah, but super interesting. I think a lot of companies going through this curve, right? They grow, they start, it runs maybe not so fast, but then it grows, and then there's this one day where it goes down, and then right, managing a team where everything goes well is quite easy. Managing a team where everything is rather not so good, it's the hard part, and turning this is quite an achievement. So quite respect them as well. But let's look a little bit about along your career, right? So what pattern for you stands out in the universal GTM truths, no matter what size, your own company, the enterprise, the fast growing? What would you suggest to other revenue leaders? What pattern they should follow?
Yeah, I mean, I think kind of like the universal truths, I would say. I mean, from my practical point of view, obviously, uh, customer first, customer centricity, even in go to market, right? You don't need to be thinking like, oh, but I'm not product. No, no, no. I think as an organization, and especially as a revenue leader, customer is king. So
Mm,
really always go back to your customers. ICP is important, but the actual customers, who are they? Do you know them? Do you speak to them? What is working? That is something that is going to really like unlock so many learnings from you to scale.
mm,
Um, Second, build for alignment, right? And bring in this leadership that can actually reach consensus instead of bringing a lot of people that just have different opinions. I think that's also very important in organizations, no matter the size. Alignment. Bring people that do understand you're on the same side and you're building together. I think that mentality is really crucial, and they become really sort of the steam of the machine, you know, when you bring people that are all focused in the same direction. And I would say like very also important, and maybe don't not underestimate this, but when you think about your positioning and your strategy, it's equally important how you talk about it. So your messaging and the way that you talk about what you do is going to be also something that will unlock a lot of opportunities, right? So if you always remember this, you bring people inside that are willing to make agreements, right? And not just find who's doing wrong. And it's very clear how you talk. And that's why sometimes I say like, yeah, even this needs to be even consistent even with your brand, right?
mm.
And then it does become a language that everyone talks inside the company towards the outside of the company, and that clear messaging and clear positioning is also going to be absolutely necessary, no matter if you're just starting or if you're like really working with huge brands or huge companies. I've seen that, and when all of these things align, you got yourself a really nice machine to really grow.
Jimena, thank you very much for that very interesting conversation. I learned a lot. I think everybody can take a lot from this. So thank you very much for your time.
No, thank you, Michael.